Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.
Welcome to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line on VSiN, the sports betting network.
You're off and running on a Sunday morning. I am Tim Murray, live from the Circus Sportsbook in downtown Las Vegas. What a day it was on Saturday. Just setting the scene for another lovely Sunday of sports. 4 games in the NBA, 4 games in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It is a just tremendous time of year. NFL draft has come and gone. No, we're not going to do draft grades, but we will get into some of my favorite overall hauls, some sleepers, some guys that I'm intrigued by where they ultimately landed. We'll get to that as the show goes on. But of course, we will get you set for all of the action today, as it is an absolutely monstrous day yet again. And can we just think back, and we'll get to about last night here a little bit later on in the start of the show here, but think about yesterday and just why we love sports and why we sit our butts on the couch each and every weekend to watch this lovely thing that we call sports. We had an Aaron Gordon dunk at the buzzer after the Clippers overcame a 22-point deficit. The Nuggets get the win 101-99. We had another ageless star. We had LeBron, even though he had the loss on Friday night, go for 38. Then we get Steph Curry last night in the win. No Jimmy Butler. He goes for 36, 9, and 7 as the Golden State Warriors take a 2-1 series lead. The drama that was Shedeur Sanders, none of it seemed to make sense. And then the Cleveland Browns, after drafting Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round, they said, you know what? Let's trade up and let's go get Shedeur Sanders at pick 144. So the long wait for Shedeur Sanders ended, and he goes to a team that does make sense, but the selection of him after drafting Dillon Gabriel doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And then in baseball, we get something that's only been done 19 times, first time since 2017, as Suarez hits 4 home runs for the Diamondbacks in a loss. And then Gabriel Landeskog for the first time since June 20th of 2022, when they were in the Stanley Cup final. He dealt with injuries for 3 years. He gets a goal last night for the Colorado Avalanche. That was all last night. So what do we have today in store for you? That's what we're here, and that's what we're going to talk about. So let's get into it. Let's set the scene for another action-packed day of sports.
Let's dive into the biggest games of the day.
Yes, indeed. Here we go. And it starts with the New York Knickerbockers taking on the Detroit Pistons as we get some bounce-back opportunities. We've also got some zigzagging, and that would start with the New York Knicks and the Detroit Pistons, as on Thursday night, draft night, every day is kind of blending together. The New York Knicks, after losing game 2 at Madison Square Garden, bounce back. They'll get that 2-point victory against the New York Knicks. And now, or against the Detroit Pistons. Now the Pistons find themselves as a 2-point favorite. So this is something that we always have fun looking at, myself and JVT and all the NBA analysts here. I'm not one of those NBA analysts here at the network. The change in the adjustment. The New York Knicks, by the way, opened as a 1-point favorite at DraftKings, and they are now a 2-point underdog. So first game of the day, the New York Knicks and the Detroit Pistons coming up at a little after 1 o'clock Eastern. The Pistons now out to a 2-point favorite. So do we get some zigzagging? We talked about the zigzag situation, the desperation spot on Friday night, as all of those teams down 0-2, both on the ice and in the NBA, all won. And now, do we get the zigzag? Do we get those teams bouncing back? We'll get to the bounce back spot. But speaking of zigzag, what do we see here this afternoon in Minneapolis? So we get the first game in Detroit, then the rather quick turnaround for the Los Angeles Lakers. As we remember, on Friday night, a little bit under the weather was Luka Doncic. The Lakers tied things up at 103, and then the Minnesota Timberwolves go on a 13-1 run to close out that victory on Friday night to win 116-104. They covered the 4-point spread. Now the point spread is 2.5. And do we see the zigzag? Do we see the Lakers do what they did in game 2, which was get that victory to even up this series? Well, Minnesota, if you think back to Friday night, phenomenal crowd, and that's what they're anticipating yet again here this afternoon in the Twin Cities.
I mean, it was better than the Lakers crowd for sure, and just, I mean, they came out and did their job. I mean, we feed off their energy, so I mean, just we're grateful for them.
I think that's the real six man, and they kind of get us going. Whether it's a bad call, they calling it out. You know, whether it's a play we were supposed to make, they're letting us know, like, you know, so it's kind of like the six man in some instances.
You look at role players play better at home, right? That's the old saying. Well, it came to fruition certainly on Friday night. Naz Reid had 11 points, couple of big three-pointers. Dante DiVincenzo statistically didn't play all that great, but the big Ragru, my ginger brother, Dante DiVincenzo, came through with a couple of big buckets, 10 threes in that one. And, of course, Jaden McDaniels was on fire Friday night with 30 points in the victory. 3:30 Eastern, Timberwolves and the Los Angeles Lakers, an adjustment of 4 down to 2.5 in favor still of the Minnesota Timberwolves against the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll see if the zigzag is true there, with the Lakers needing this win to even up the series at 2 games apiece. A lot of NBA chatter for you all afternoon long, and we'll talk to Zachary Cohen in the second hour of the show. He'll join us at 11:30 Eastern. And then later tonight, we get the Boston Celtics against the Orlando Magic. We got that desperation bump from the Orlando Magic as they got the win 95-93 on Friday night. And now the Celtics find themselves as a 7-point favorite against the Orlando Magic tonight down there in Mickey World. Drew Holiday has been ruled out for this one. Jaylen Brown listed as questionable. In the loss on Friday night, Jason Tatum was very impressive there, dealing with a little bit of injury, but still not enough with 36 points. Jason Tatum and the Celtics looking to bounce back tonight against the Orlando Magic.
And give them credit. You know, they compete, they play hard, they got some defenders. But, you know, I think it just, we had to get some stops first, you know, and get in transition and get our pace up. You know, I think we will next game.
95-93 was the final on Friday night as the Magic got the victory. We've seen this point spread kind of hang out in that 7 range. I did lay a little 6.5. You know me, I don't like to lay points, but I did lay a little bit with the Boston Celtics, anticipating a bounce back performance. But the Orlando Magic, I'll tell you what, they've been feisty, no doubt about it, as they got that win on Friday night, 95-93. We'll see what the total brings here, as the total sits there at 197.5, the lowest total of the 4 games today in the NBA. Last game on the NBA docket, the Indiana Pacers and the Milwaukee Bucks. The Bucks, as we talked about, once again, that desperation spot. The Bucks got it done, and Gary Trent Jr., I don't know if Gary Trent Jr. has ever played a better game in his life. Maybe at some point in high school or in middle school hoops, but 37 points for Gary Trent Jr. on Friday night. Is that sustainable as they play late night tonight at the Fiserv Forum? I enjoy this series because there is true disdain, it feels like, between these two franchises, the Pacers and the Bucks. Bucks down 2-1. This was a game that we talked about with JVT briefly yesterday, where you saw that overreaction in the desperation first half line, where the Bucks closed as a 4.5-5-point favorite for the game, and were a 5-point first half favorite. Didn't cover the first half line, of course, did cover the full game number, and of course got that victory. Today, you look at the first half number, back to normal. -2 for the Milwaukee Bucks for a 4.5-point spread. Worth noting this, the Detroit Pistons in that desperation spot, small number at -2. First half line also sitting at -2. On the ice today, 4 games and all bounce back situations, because remember, these 4 home teams all found themselves in an 0-2 spot heading into Friday, and they all got the win. The St. Louis Blues, the New Jersey Devils, in double overtime. The Montreal Canadiens and then the Edmonton Oilers. The Oilers find themselves as a minus 130 favorite against the Los Angeles Kings. This was interesting news here. Later on this evening, Montreal Canadiens taking on the Washington Capitals. That was a game that the Canadiens were able to get the win. Remember, had the big fracas there. Tom Wilson had the crying face. And also late in that game, Logan Thompson, the Washington Capitals goalie, was smashed while he was in net and had to be helped off the ice. Well, how about this morning from John Walton, the voice of the Washington Capitals? He tweeted out, Logan Thompson is in the starter's net at the morning skate. Gamesmanship or starting? We will find out tonight, but that is some positive news for the Washington Capitals, up 2-1, but did drop game 3 on Friday night. We will break down the full hockey card for you coming up in the second hour with Todd Furman, as he will give us his thoughts on the 4 games on the ice starting at 1 o'clock Eastern with St. Louis Blues. So let's get you set for the day. Who is coming on the program? It is the VSiN Weekend Morning Line. We're going to take a look back at the Tennessee Titans draft. Maybe the most overlooked draft out there, what the Tennessee Titans did, because you might recall that they had the number 1 overall pick and they utilized it on a quarterback. I know a lot of that hasn't been discussed, but Buck Reising going to join us later on in this hour. Jonathan Peterlin, though, from the land. I texted with Jonathan on Friday, curious what the Browns would do at the quarterback position. He didn't believe they would go quarterback at 33 or 36. He was right. And then they drafted 2 quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round and Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. We'll try to make sense of the Cleveland Browns decision. Hour number 2, Todd Furman and Zachary Cohen will join us in the final hour. Patrick Everson, our guy, to give us the latest from behind the counter, and Thor Nystrom as we run through the NFL draft. So a busy show for you today. I'm Tim Murray. We're up and running. It is the VSiN Weekend Morning Line. As we have set the scene for Sunday, let's take that step back. You might be a little groggy-eyed about last night. We run through what we saw last night on what was one hell of a day of sports. It is VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
We keep it rolling here on a Sunday morning. I'm Tim Murray, live from the Circus Sportsbook in downtown Las Vegas. We like to call it the calm before the storm. I like to look out over my shoulder, look at that beautiful board back there and say, oh yeah, baby. As soon as this show completes, we'll have games on the ice, we'll have games on the hardwood, baseball will be rolling along. Another lovely Sunday ahead of us, 4 playoff games in both the NBA and the NHL. So we set the scene for you. The 4 games we got today on the NBA, 4 games we got today on the ice. Bounce back spots, zigzag spots, everything you could ask for. But yesterday was awesome, okay? And I know it's 7:15 for me. It may be 10:15 for you on the East Coast. But we need to take a step back. We need to get that dust out of our eyes. We need to say, well, about last night, what happened yesterday? And I know it was in the afternoon, but damn, was that Denver Nuggets Clippers game invigorating. What a game it was. We had a little dust up there between Kristen Brown and James Harden at the end of the first half. We had some technicals. We thought maybe James Harden threw a fisticuff. They were like, no, his hand was open. It's fine. But then as that game goes on in the fourth quarter, chipping away, Clippers chipping away. Norman Powell is becoming an absolute beast from 3. And we're all tied up late in that game, 99-99. And Nikola Jokic, we were unable to get the clip for you, but Jokic and Aaron Gordon at the podium last night were absolutely hilarious. As Aaron Gordon said, it was a great pass. And there was a pause, and then a reporter asked Jokic, was it a pass? And he just puts his head down and is like, no. Of course it wasn't. It was actually a terrible shot. It was great defense, but that's the name of the game, man. And Aaron Gordon, give him credit. He was there, and somehow, some way, one of the, I don't want to say crazier finishes, but that was remarkable finish that we saw between the Nuggets and the Clippers last night. And I know somewhere out there, my guy JVT, he was on the show yesterday. He's just waiting for the bottom to fall out of that bucket of fries. He put too much vinegar on it, and he's just waiting for that bottom to fall out here. Because the Clippers have been the better team in this series. And I still think they win this series. They are the betting favorite to win the series at minus $135 at DraftKings. But if you're the Clippers, and I know you were down 20 points and you came back and you tied that game up. But if that game goes to overtime, the Clippers are winning. But it didn't. Aaron Gordon was there with the tremendous putback at the buzzer. And now they go back to Denver, even up at 2 games apiece. The Clippers are a favorite for game number 5. I think they take care of business there. Once again, I continue to believe that this Clippers team is better. I bet them at plus money to win this series before the odds shifted completely. And I think they take care of business. But man, you think about how this series has unfolded for the Los Angeles Clippers so far. You lose game 1 because of Russell Westbrook and just wildness. You get that second win, dominate game 3. And I think yesterday has to be a little bit frustrating, but a crazy game there. Speaking of just incredible performances, how about Steph Curry last night? 36, 9, and 7. The Golden State Warriors now up 2-1. They were without Jimmy Butler. They went off as a 2-point favorite. The zigzag anticipation there, the Rockets would get the win, and the Warriors take care of business. Brandon Podziemski played exceptionally well as they win 104-93. But Steph Curry continues to be just the ageless wonder. We've got a couple of dudes, man, whether it be LeBron, whatever you want to say about him. Dude's 40 years old, dropping 38 on Friday night. And then we get Steph Curry, 36, 9, and 7 last night in the win, hit 5 3-pointers. His head coach, in amazement, is Steve Kerr.
Steph Curry, he's one of the greatest players of all time. He's 37. He's one of the most well-conditioned athletes I've ever seen in my life. To play 41 minutes against that kind of defense, to have a slow start and then find his rhythm, which we've seen him do, countless times over the years, to hit big shots, to only turn it over twice against that kind of pressure. He was brilliant. So I hope that was a better quote than the first one.
And he does it again, man. So the Golden State Warriors now up 2-1. They're back at it for game 4 coming up on Monday night. And we'll see if Jimmy Butler does return for the Golden State Warriors in that spot late night on Monday evening against the Houston Rockets. But the Warriors, a lot of us expected this to be a pretty unique challenge for the Houston Rockets, a team with not much experience in the postseason, a veteran team in the Warriors. And now here they are, 2-1 lead for the Golden State Warriors. All right, what else happened yesterday? Let's get to it. And we'll talk more about it with Jonathan Peterlin later on in this hour. We were wondering, as the show was wrapping up yesterday, when would Shedeur Sanders hear his name called? And I told you about the tickets that I had on Shedeur Sanders and his possible landing spots. Pre-draft, I took a little Pittsburgh Steelers at plus 650. Matt Humans and I were talking about that on VSiN Primetime. And then on Friday morning, I grabbed some Raiders. And I felt good at multiple junctions that bet would come home. Never in my wildest imagination. Well, I'll say this. On Saturday morning, I was in full on, I don't know, shoulder shrug. Like, who the hell knows where Shedeur Sanders will ultimately go? But if you think back to the pre-draft situation, the betting favorite on Thursday was the Pittsburgh Steelers to select Shedeur Sanders. Number 2 were the Cleveland Browns. And we had a pretty good feeling it wouldn't be Cleveland early on in the first round, but maybe it would be them with the first pick of the second round. And then they acquired another pick, right? Because of the trade down with Jacksonville. So they had 33 and 36. 33 and 36 go by the wayside. And then number 94 rolls around on Friday night, and it's Dylan Gabriel out of Oregon. All right, we'll just cross off the Cleveland Browns. And then they say, not so fast. Let's trade back up to 144, and let's get Shedeur Sanders. Andrew Berry is the general manager of the Cleveland Browns.
Shedeur, we talk oftentimes about quarterback being the most important position in the sport. We obviously spent a lot of time with Shedeur throughout the process. He's highly accurate, can play well from the pocket, very productive college career. And, we felt like it wasn't necessarily the plan going into the weekend to select two quarterbacks, but as we talk about, we do believe in best player available. We do believe in positional value, and we didn't necessarily expect him to be available in the fifth round. And so we love adding competition to every position room, and adding him to compete with the guys that are already in there. We felt like that was the appropriate thing to do.
It's one hell of a weird room, man. Think about that room. You've got Deshaun Watson likely out for the year and all of his off the field nonsense. You bring back Joe Flacco, comeback player of the year from a couple of years back, helped you go to the playoffs. You have Kenny Pickett, who you traded for, and now Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. And I'm not a talent evaluator. We talked about this on Thursday night when I was sitting here with Matt Brown and Matt Humans. We love betting this draft. We love betting the draft, and we love how it ultimately plays out. But man, you got to make sense of this one for me. I'll say this. If they didn't take Dylan Gabriel at 94, makes a ton of sense, right? Kevin Stefanski with quarterbacks that are not overly mobile. Case Keenum, Kirk Cousins. He's had success. Precision passing. I like the fit for Shedeur Sanders, but I had to get a kick out of this, as you got to love Twitter and finding old tweets. How about Deion Sanders back in 2018 tweeted this out? I love what the Browns have done this offseason, but if I'm a young QB, ain't no way I'm going to Cleveland. I would pull an Eli Manning if possible. Gotta love unearthing old tweets. All right, what else happened last night real quickly? Let's hit on a couple of things. How about Eugenio Suarez going yard 4 times last night for the Arizona Diamondbacks in a loss? And I'm going to pull something up on my phone here because, baseball, you got a lot of cool things that happen. And, no-hitters are kind of, big deal. How about this? In Major League Baseball history, we've had 305 no-hitters, 24 perfect games. What we saw last night in Arizona, it's only the 19th time that's happened. Eugenio Suarez, also in a loss, by the way. They lost in extra innings, did the Arizona Diamondbacks. Hit 4 bombs in 4 consecutive at-bats. And as this says, OptaStats here, first player in MLB history to homer in 4 consecutive at-bats, but still lose. So quite the night last night. Anyone out there have a ticket on multiple home runs for Suarez? I think there was like a 20-1 ticket on him to hit over 2.5 home runs. All right. The Tennessee Titans, they've got Cam Ward. What should they look like in 2025? We'll find out next.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
We keep it rolling here on a Sunday morning. It is the VSiN Weekend Morning Line. I'm Tim Murray, live from the Circus Sportsbook in downtown Las Vegas. Hey, just a reminder, folks, Profit X is offering the best odds all baseball season long. Profit X is a peer-to-peer sports exchange available in 40-plus states. The first of its kind in the U.S., you'll be able to make your sports picks against other groups of fans rather than against the sports books. Exchanges guarantee you the best odds on average by 10 to 20%. You can even request your own odds. Download Profit X today and use the code VSiN, that's VSIN, and you'll earn up to $200 in profit cash over your first month. We keep it rolling here on a Sunday morning. We got a busy day ahead of us on the ice and on the hardwood, but of course, the NFL draft now in the rear view. 3 days complete down there. Not down there, I guess up there in Green Bay, right? Yeah, they're up there in Green Bay. And the first overall pick, I know you might have forgot because of everything else that unfolded, was occupied by the Tennessee Titans. And you also might have forgot they used it on a quarterback, Cam Ward. And to help us break down what Cam Ward will look like in Nashville, Buck Reising from 104.5 The Fan, or 105.45 The Zone, I beg your pardon, in Nashville joins us right now, courtesy of our progressive guest line. And, especially at a betting network, Buck, like we are, when we know something's going to happen, especially in the draft, we just kind of push it to the side. And that's essentially what happened with Cam Ward. I can't remember, though, a situation from a national narrative standpoint where a number one pick like Cam Ward happens and no one seems to be talking about it. So I wanted to get you on to discuss it because we've got a unique talent. And I think, by the way, a freaking awesome story for a dude who started at an FCS school, Incarnate Word. What do you make of this fit? Cam Ward in Nashville. He's the co-favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year with Ashton Genty. Does he hit the ground running, and what are you expecting from Ward as a rookie down there in Nashville?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tim. And you're speaking to the perpetual plight of the Titans fan, where they are. There is no national narrative about the Tennessee Titans because nobody cares about the Tennessee Titans nationally. I love the fit of Cam Ward. I love the player. I love the personality. Everything that I've heard about him from people who covered him from Incarnate Word to Wazoo to Miami and up through this process speak glowingly about the player and most importantly, the person, because it's not just an on-the-field thing that they need. Obviously, they need significantly better quarterback play than the 2024 disaster that was Will Levis / Mason Rudolph. But they need leadership. They need direction in that locker room. And the new administration, because the Titans as an organization have continued to fire people these last 3 off seasons, be it John Robinson to Mike Vrabel to Rand Carthon, and now the combination of Mike Borgonzi, GM, and Brian Callahan, head coach, they need somebody to come in and kind of build up the culture that they've been so desperately seeking, because last year's roster was one without any kind of real direction.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And 3-14 just a year ago. And now there's hope for the Tennessee Titans in a division that has always kind of felt, obviously Houston is making that leap and they've won the division the last couple of years. So I want to dive into the draft a little bit later on, but sticking with Cam Ward and, Offensive Rookie of the Year is always a fascinating discussion. Last year, you had Caleb Williams going 1, and then you had Jaden Daniels going 2, but you knew Bo Nix was more than likely going to be the starter once camp started rolling around, and we found out he was going to be the guy. So there was a lot of discussion out there. This year, when you look at early thoughts on Offensive Rookie of the Year, it seems like Cam Ward will be the only rookie starter out of camp. Now, maybe Tyler Shuck wins the job in New Orleans. We'll see how that ultimately plays out. But you've got Ashton Genty. You've got a lot of, fascinating running back situations out there. But from a production standpoint, knowing what's on this roster and a pretty decent backfield, what are you expecting production-wise from Cam Ward? And, if you watched him in college at Wazoo, at Miami last year, he loves to utilize his legs. How much would you guess they're going to utilize those legs with him in year number 1?
That's a good question. And Brian Callahan, the head coach, downplayed even the idea that he was going to be the day 1 starter, which I get at a press conference. That's all well and good. Declining that they would name starters or saying that they would name starters around September. But obviously you take a quarterback number 1 overall pick, especially given what's on this roster, that player is expected to start. I am very curious how that scheme adaptation is going to come, because Will Levis was a decent athlete, but an unwilling runner, so you really never saw them use the quarterback mobilities in last year's version of this system. Now, the combination of Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, who is a talented player, but an unavailable player, largely due to concussions, unfortunately, through his first 2 seasons. It's going to be curious to see how they get that involved. I guess, Tim, from my standpoint, he's going to have to make plays outside of structure as much as anything, because they did address wide receiver in this draft. They waited until day 3 to do it. The offensive line is something that they prioritized in free agency this year, but at best it's maybe a league average group. Cam Ward is going to be under duress, and he's going to have to put some of those superstar qualities that he has on display, because there's not playmakers really on this football team right now. I'd still expect them to finish 4th place in the division. I'd still expect them to be a bottom 3rd roster in the NFL this year, but Cam Ward is going to have to do a lot of the heavy lifting unto himself, which would probably lead to some statistical production in his favor.
Buck Reising joining us here. You can catch him weekdays on 104.5 The Zone down there in Nashville, giving us the latest on Cam Ward. I just got to ask, because I played the clip yesterday. Look, I'm a sucker for, unique stories. And, for a guy that was coming out of Incarnate Word, a no-star recruit, then he goes to Wazoo, which is, not a place that outside of Gardner Minshew is one you think of as a quarterback factory. And then he goes to Miami and puts up massive numbers. I know they miss out on the playoff. And then you get the story of Warren Moon giving him the number one. How was that received in town? I know Moon was obviously a legend in Houston. That franchise carries over to Tennessee. What's that kind of good vibe story feeling like down there in Nashville that Cam Ward will get to wear number one for Warren Moon?
Well, I'm not an overwhelmingly sentimental person, Tim, but I will tell you that was a really touching moment, truly, because especially when you look at it in comparison to what's going on with Abdul Carter and Lawrence Taylor.
No, you can't wear 56, young fella. I'm wearing that. That's up in the rafters.
I think he said something to the effect of "Go make another number famous," which is pretty spot on for LT. And listen, I wouldn't have blamed Warren Moon if that was the approach that he chose to take, because Warren Moon is not just significant to this franchise's history, because of course the Houston Oilers history is the Tennessee Titans history, but it's important NFL history. And so Warren Moon was very conflicted about this, talking to him after the fact. And he said he made the decision to let Cam Ward wear the number about a day and a half before they actually went through the whole process of surprising Cam Ward with Warren Moon at the press conference. If people haven't seen that, I'm sure it's available on social media. The scene itself was awesome, with them bringing Cam Ward in to introduce him, and Mike Borgonzi saying, well, we have somebody to surprise you, and Warren Moon walking out with the number one Cam Ward Titans jersey. So here in Nashville, I think people are overwhelmingly grateful for Warren Moon. If they didn't have love for Warren Moon before because of his history being Houston as opposed to Nashville, there's a tremendous amount of respect and gratefulness for him now. Now, he said, which was interesting to me, Tim, he said that he hoped they would still never see somebody wear the number one Houston Oilers jersey again. Oh. And it is interesting that the Titans will not wear the Houston Oilers throwback this year. In fact, Warren Moon hinted that there were new Titans jerseys coming at some point in time. So I would hate it if last year was the only year, or the last 2 years were the only years that we got to see the Houston Oilers throwbacks. But it sounds like potentially the Titans organization is trying to scheme up a Houston Oilers look-alike in a Tennessee Titans logo.
And I don't know, that might make me really sad if we don't get to see those lovely kits that Houston used to rock there with the Oilers.
I'm telling you, Tim, I think it's the only way they got Warren to go for
it. Buck, before we let you run, I'm going to put you on the spot. We don't know the schedule officially. We know the opponents. We don't know how it'll lay out. Right now, the market has it at 5.5. If you had to guess right now, would you go over or under 5.5 wins in the final 45 seconds here?
I'd go under. I just don't think they're a very good football team. I think that their draft indicates that they are more about setting the floor for their roster and then building upon it. They've been preaching patience over panic here, which is not something the Tennessee Titans organization has done overwhelmingly well in these last couple of years with their firing and hiring habits. But we'll see if they stick to it this time around. But I'm not convinced that Cam Ward is enough to make a significant enough difference without more help around him.
Buck, appreciate the insight, man, and enjoy it down there with Cam Ward coming to town.
I'm excited to watch him play. He's a really impressive young man, and I know it's going to give the fan base at least some hope in the immediate.
He's Buck Reising. You can follow him on Twitter at Buck, REISING, and catch him on 104.5 The Zone weekdays there in Nashville. All right, from Nashville to the land, Cleveland. Shedeur Sanders, he makes some sense, but did he make sense after they drafted Dylan Gabriel 2 rounds prior? We'll find out next.
You're tuned in to the VSiN Weekend Morning Line.
We keep it rolling here on a Sunday morning, live from the Circus Sportsbook. I'm your host, Tim Murray, up until 1 o'clock Eastern. Hour number 2, we'll get into the nitty-gritty. That is the NBA and Stanley Cup playoffs. 4 games in hoops and 4 games on the ice. Todd Furman and Zachary Cohen in hour number 2. Hey, folks, just a reminder, wherever you are, whether you're at home, on the road, or on the go, there's never been more opportunities to check out us here at VSiN. You can stream us on VSiN.com. You can watch us on our lovely app, the VSiN Watch app. Check us out on YouTube TV, iHeartRadio, Fire TV, Roku, SiriusXM channel 158. So check it all out. You can go over to VSiN.com, see all the different spots you can find us, as well as NESN Plus. Hello, New England. How are you on this lovely Sunday morning? All right, speaking of, I don't know how to transition from New England to Cleveland, but we're going to make it happen. We're going to do it right now, courtesy of our progressive guest line. And welcome in my good friend, Jonathan Peterlin, who you can catch out weekdays on 92.3 The Fan up there in the land. And, you know, we were just talking off air about it, JP, and such a fascinating draft because we're going to overlook them trading out of the number 2 spot to focus on a 5th round pick, which you don't do all that often. But here we are. The Cleveland Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders. And if you had told me on Thursday prior to the draft that Shedeur Sanders was a Cleveland Brown, I'd say, makes sense. Totally makes sense. Fits that system. And if you had told me on Saturday morning that he was going to be a Cleveland Brown, I would have told you you're absolutely crazy because they just spent a 3rd round pick on Dillon Gabriel. What's your understanding on how this all unfolded? Because the Dillon Gabriel selection in the 3rd round just makes absolutely no sense now that they went out and acquired Shedeur yesterday in the 5th.
Yeah, no question. And Tim, great to be with you here today. It's perplexing in many ways. I think they looked at the value of Shedeur Sanders. I think they looked at that and said, hey, this is the front office that would value in many ways. They're very analytically driven, and they're very much the type of front office that would be like, wait a second. We had a 2nd round. Let's just be generous and say a 2nd round grade on Shedeur, and now he's there in the 5th round, and we got to do this. But you know this. You watch enough college football. You can't let Dillon Gabriel, that oompa loompa of a human, you must be this tall to ride the ride. You can't let him stand in the way of whatever your plans are. And so getting Shedeur, now the interesting part for myself, Tim, I'm trying to figure out if this means the Browns are going to try to be relatively competitive. On Saturday morning, so I did an interview on Saturday morning, and I told the host that I was talking to, I was like, well, that's it. You took Dillon Gabriel. They're going to win maybe 4 games this year, maybe 5 games this year. Like if you're lucky, you win that many, and then you're zeroing in on the 2026 draft class. Now, with Shedeur in the 5th round, you can still do those things, but maybe, just maybe, you try to win a few more games, and maybe, just maybe, if Shedeur does show you that he could be something better than a 5th round quarterback and more like that 1st, 2nd round quarterback, then maybe you have something, and maybe those 2 picks you now have in the 2026 draft, maybe you could spend them elsewhere.
Look, getting Shedeur in the 5th round, you know, say what you will about him, and now he fits with Kevin Stefanski and this offense, and I think it was Todd McShay, but others have mentioned it, just how he has excelled with quarterbacks who aren't necessarily fleet of foot, more precise passers, whether it be Case Keenum or Kirk Cousins. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this makes a ton of sense for him to go there. The Dillon Gabriel wrinkle is just kind of head scratching. Look, if they had taken Shedeur in the 3rd and then Dillon Gabriel in the 6th as like, you know, a good dude in the quarterback room, would have made a ton of sense. But let's shift past that, because the Cleveland Browns obviously also make an enormous splash in the 1st round where they're sitting there at 2. We think they're destined to get this unicorn in Travis Hunter. And I think Dion had come out at some point during the process and said they're going to draft at least one of my 2 sons, indicating, you know, Travis Hunter and Shedeur. He was accurate in that assessment. So walk us through what happened with the number 2 pick and why they decided to trade back to number 5, pick up the 36th overall pick, as well as a 1st round pick next year. How did this all play out? And what are your thoughts on the Browns passing on Travis Hunter and ultimately landing with Mason Graham?
Yeah, it's a right church, wrong pew type moment for Dion there. What's interesting, so I like Mason Graham. I got nothing bad to say about Mason Graham. I felt bad for him doing my local show. Everyone just wanted to just tear Mason Graham apart. And it's like, it's not his fault that this all went down the way it did. But when they moved off of Travis Hunter, you had to think that they were doing it with the assumption that this was a multi-year rebuild and they were going to go hard in the 2026 draft. And this was about just getting players that they believe can be on the team for 10 years. And Mason Graham's a really good player. So like there was no problem with that thought process. People got wrapped up in, the hype that is Travis Hunter, but there's no issue that way. And so I legitimately, especially after the second round, you're just thinking they're just all part of the rebuild. They're just stockpiling players, and then it's all going to be about 2026. And now it feels like that might be thrown out the window a little bit if Shedeur can be something, if he can be good. And so it's an exciting time, all things considered, because there was about to be a lot of apathy that set in because we just went through a 3-win season. It was miserable, and this next year being bad, it just would have been no fun at all. So you get that spark, which is just always very cool.
Also, by the way, Shedeur Sanders gets selected, and the Cleveland Cavaliers win by like $1 billion yesterday. They're like, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that later. Yeah. Let's focus on this. So as for the quarterback situation, Jonathan Peterlin joining us here, courtesy of our Progressive Guest Line, host of the Afternoon Jive program, 92.3 The Fan there in Cleveland. So you've got Watson, who probably will never play another down, if I had to guess, in Cleveland. You've got Flacco back. Kenny Pickett they make the trade for. I mean, this is going to be a wild competition. How would you handicap the competition right now with these 4 quarterbacks heading into the upcoming offseason?
All right, I'll handicap it. It is with the acknowledgement that it's wide open. And whether it was Pickett or whether it was Flacco, they just kept saying, like, it's going to be a competition. Now, Pickett's odd that he thinks he can win it. Flacco's like, I didn't come here to not win it. And I'm sure Gabriel and Shedeur both think they can win it too. But it is as wide open gets. If you made me guess how it happens, and this is coming from someone that for months was like, you're going to draft Shedeur Sanders, and when you draft him, he's your instant day one starter, and then you're off to the races. But being picked in the 5th round does change some things. And it definitely impacts the discussion. If you made me bet, I would bet it's Joe Flacco for like 4 or 5 weeks until the wheels fall off, like it always does with Joe Flacco. I don't think Kenny Pickett's making it out of training camp, if we're being honest, because you can't carry a million quarterbacks. Sure. So I would bet Kenny Pickett is the casualty. You throw Flacco out there, fan favorite. He's going to mentor Shedeur Sanders. Like, he's going to be good to be around. He'll be given a real opportunity. He'll flounder in it. Like, he'll do fine the way that Joe does, but he's getting older. He'll flounder. Shedeur comes in. Shedeur looks better than what Flacco did. And then you feel like you have a real quarterback moving forward and something to build on. And then you spend next offseason loading up with assets and weapons and everything else. But if you maybe cap it, that's how I see it. Like 4 or 5 games for Flacco, and then Shedeur finds his way into it.
All right. We're going to get a little nerdy here with Jonathan Peterlin. So the offensive coordinator for the Browns is Tommy Rees. And he was the OC at Notre Dame. And he took a lot of grief. I was not one person. I loved him. I thought he did an awesome job. When you can get Drew Pine to win you as many games as he did, I think he deserves more credit than he did. But that's beside the point. Notre Dame is known for having tight ends, right? They like to call themselves tight end U. Now, the Cleveland Browns have David Njoku and Harold Fannin Jr., who is just an absolute beast, and I love the selection for the Browns. Are we just going to see 12 formation nonstop for the Cleveland Browns next year?
If you really want to nerd out, I can tell you Stefanski's dream is 13 personnel. That's his 3 tight ends constantly. He's a tight end. He loves his tight ends. Has for the longest time. I mean, it goes back to really the beginnings of his time here in Cleveland when it was Njoku and it was Austin Hooper, and they were just trying to make that whole thing work. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that. I mean, Fannin, just a beloved kid because he's a local kid. He grew up in the area, and then Bowling Green is right down the road as well. There was not a more home run pick than Fannin to the Browns. People absolutely loved it. But yeah, this fits Stefanski and what he wants to do. Loves the tight end.
JP, appreciate it. Oh, by the way, your basketball team is 1 win away from making it to the second round. But all that matters right now is Shedeur Sanders there in Cleveland. Appreciate it, brother, and we'll talk soon, no doubt.
Thanks, Tim. Good catching up with you, man.
There he is, Jonathan Peterlin. Isn't that funny? They won by like $1 billion yesterday, 124-87. And I'm sure, and I know how it works. I'm sure JP on his program on Monday will spend 90% of it talking about the draft. It's just the way the cookie crumbles there. But a hell of a win yesterday for the Cavs as they are going to finish off the Heat in short order. Hey, folks, just a reminder, The NBA playoffs are indeed here, and so is the VSiN Killer Sports NBA Playoff Challenge. We've invited 15 sharp minds from the world of VSiN and Killer Sports to go head-to-head, making 38 picks from the start of the playoffs all the way through the NBA Finals. That's a total of 570 NBA playoff picks, all available for VSiN Pro subscribers. Picks are locked in 1 hour before each game, so you'll have fresh insights to guide your bets every step of the postseason. And right now, you can get full VSiN Pro access all the way through August 1st for just $59. Head on over to vsin.com/subscribe.